The rumble of a motorcycle engine cut through the quiet afternoon as Keanu Reeves pulled into the gravel parking lot of the roadside diner. The small brick building with its neon, open sign stood alone on the outskirts of Los Angeles, miles away from the flashy restaurants where celebrities were spotted daily. This place, with its slightly faded exterior and humble charm, had caught his eye months ago when he heard it was about to close down after 30 years of serving locals. No one knew that Keanu had quietly purchased it through one of his business managers. He hadn't made any announcements or turned it into a vanity project with his name plastered on the sign. Instead, he kept the original name, Blue Ridge Diner, preserved the menu that locals loved, and made sure the staff kept their jobs. Today, with his dark helmet hiding his face, he looked like any other motorcycle enthusiast stopping for a late lunch. He removed the helmet, revealing messy hair that fell just above his shoulders. A few days' worth of stubble covered his jaw, and dark sunglasses stayed firmly in place as he tucked a worn baseball cap low over his eyes. His jeans had authentic wear marks at the knees, and his black jacket was far from the designer clothes he wore to premieres. The bell above the door jingled as he stepped inside. The aroma of coffee and grilled burgers filled the air. Only 3 tables were occupied, an elderly couple sharing a slice of pie, a truck driver hunched over a steaming mug, and a woman typing furiously on a laptop. None of them looked up as Keanu slid into a corner booth where he could observe the entire place. He picked up a laminated menu, even though he'd memorized it weeks ago when approving the updated prices. Keeping them affordable had been his only request when taking ownership. The vinyl seat squeaked beneath him as he settled in, taking in the details of his investment. The checkered floor tiles showed signs of decades of foot traffic. Photos of local high school sports teams lined one wall, while the counter with its spinning stools had been recently refostered, a small improvement he'd authorized when the manager mentioned they were falling apart. A waitress with frizzy hair pulled into a loose bun approached his table. Deep creases formed around her eyes when she smiled, not the kind that come from age, but from worry. Her name tag read Lynn. "Afternoon," she said, setting down a glass of water. "First time here? Don't think I've seen you before." Keanu nodded, deepening his voice slightly. "Just passing through. Place looks good from the road." "Been here 20 years myself," she replied, pulling a pencil from behind her ear. "Thought we were gunners a few months back, but then some mystery buyer saved the place. Kept everything the same, thank goodness. Ready to order or need a minute?" "Coffee, black," he said, unable to hold back a small smile. "And whatever's your favorite on the menu." Lynn tapped her pencil against the pad. "Honest answer. The meatloaf, my grandma's recipe. Owner let me add it when the old cook retired." "Meatloaf it is then." As Lynn walked away, Keanu relaxed into the booth. This was why he bought the place, not as an investment, but as a preservation. Places like this were disappearing, replaced by chain restaurants with no soul. He watched the easy way Lynn chatted with the elderly couple, the respect she showed the truck driver as she refilled his coffee without being asked. Through the serving window, he could see the cook, a heavy-set man with tattoos covering his arms, carefully plating food. The manager, a woman in her 50s, was going through paperwork at the far end of the counter, occasionally looking up to survey the diner with pride. These were the kinds of people Keanu had grown up around. Hard-working folks who showed up every day without complaint, who found dignity in doing their jobs well, even when no one was watching. People who deserved security in a world that increasingly offered none. When Lynn returned with his coffee, he thanked her quietly, wrapping his hands around the warm mug. He was halfway through his first sip when he heard it, a muffled sob coming from the kitchen, followed by hushed voices. Lynn's smile faltered as she glanced toward the sound, concern flashing across her face before she composed herself. "Food'll be right up," she said, but her cheerfulness now seemed forced. Keanu nodded, his attention now focused on the kitchen doors. Something was wrong, and despite his desire to remain anonymous, he couldn't ignore it. 2 weeks passed before Keanu returned to the Blue Ridge Diner. This time, he arrived just after the lunch rush, when the place would be quieter but not empty enough to draw attention to himself. Same baseball cap pulled low, same worn jacket, same corner booth. The only difference was the small gift bag tucked beside him on the seat. He scanned the diner, looking for Lynn. The place felt lighter somehow, the atmosphere cheerier than on his last visit. The jukebox in the corner played an old Johnny Cash song, and sunlight streamed through the recently cleaned windows. He noticed small changes: fresh flowers on the counter, new photos added to the wall, a chalkboard announcing daily specials in colorful writing. The bell above the door jingled as a group of construction workers entered, their boots leaving dusty prints on the floor. Behind the counter, Tina caught Keanu's eye and gave a subtle nod of recognition before turning to greet the workers. The kitchen doors swung open, and there was Lynn. The change in her was immediately noticeable. The dark circles under her eyes had faded, and her step had a bounce that had been missing before. Her uniform looked newer, perhaps not brand new, but freshly pressed and better fitting. Her hair was styled differently too, pulled back with a colorful clip instead of the hasty bun from his previous visit. She was laughing at something the cook, Pete, had said as they'd both emerged from the kitchen. The easy camaraderie between them was evident as she playfully swatted his arm with her order pad. Keanu found himself smiling at the transformation. When Lynn approached his table, she didn't immediately recognize him. Why would she? He'd been just another customer passing through. "Afternoon," she greeted warmly, setting down a glass of water. "What can I get for you today?" Keanu looked up, keeping his face partially shadowed by his cap. "Coffee, black, and I heard the meatloaf here is pretty good." Lynn's eyes widened slightly with recognition. "Hey, you were here a couple weeks ago. The motorcycle guy." Her smile broadened. "You came back for the meatloaf, huh? Must have made an impression." "Best I've ever had," he replied honestly. "How have you been?" The question was simple, casual, the kind strangers exchange without expecting a real answer. But Lynn's face lit up in a way that told him everything he needed to know. "Actually, things have been really good," she said, her voice warm with genuine happiness. "Really good. Like universe finally cutting me a break kind of good." "Yeah?" Keanu asked, allowing himself to share in her joy. "Glad to hear it." "It's the craziest thing," Lynn continued, lowering her voice conspiratorially. "My landlord was going to double my rent, had me and my boy practically packing boxes. Then out of nowhere, this new management company buys the building and freezes our rent for 5 years. 5 years. She shook her head in disbelief. "And they started this program that's helping with my son's medical bills. It's like, I don't know, like someone waved a magic wand or something." "Sometimes good things happen to good people," Keanu offered softly. Lynn's smile turned thoughtful. "You know, that's almost exactly what Tina said, though I'm not sure what I did to deserve it." "Probably more than you realize," he replied. She laughed lightly, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "Well, whatever cosmic force decided to give us a break, I'm grateful. Bobby, that's my son. He's doing much better with the physical therapy. Doctor says he might even be able to play basketball again next year. Not professionally or anything, but just for fun, you know." Keanu nodded, genuinely pleased. "That's great news." "Anyway," Lynn said, suddenly seeming to remember she was at work, "you don't need to hear my whole life story. Coffee and meatloaf coming right up." As she walked away, Keanu noticed other changes in her, the confidence in her posture, the lightness in her step. She stopped to chat with an elderly man at another table, placing her hand gently on his shoulder as they spoke. When she laughed at something he said, the sound carried across the diner, bright and unrestrained. Through the serving window, Keanu could see Pete working on his order, calling out something to Lynn as she passed. The dynamic between them seemed different too, less tense, more familiar. Whatever burden Lynn had been carrying had clearly lifted, allowing room for normal workplace friendships to flourish. Keanu slid the small gift bag under the table. He brought it thinking he might find a way to anonymously leave it for Bobby, a signed poster from one of his movies that the teenager might enjoy. But seeing Lynn now, he realized it wasn't necessary. His actual gift had already done what he hoped, given a hard-working mother and her son the breathing room they needed to heal and move forward. Sometimes the best part of having wealth and fame wasn't what you could buy, but the problems you could solve for others when no one was looking. 6 months later, Keanu pulled his motorcycle into the now familiar parking lot of the Blue Ridge Diner. The autumn sun cast long shadows across the recently repaved asphalt. A new sign hung above the entrance, Same classic design but freshly painted, the neon glowing brightly even in daylight. He smiled at the changes visible from the outside. The flower boxes under the windows burst with fall mums in bright oranges and yellows. The windows themselves sparkled clean, and through them he could see that the diner was busy, nearly every table filled with customers enjoying their meals. This visit wasn't planned. He'd been on a long motorcycle ride, clearing his head after finishing his latest film, when he found himself turning onto the highway that led here. Something about this place and the people in it had nestled in his heart. Keanu removed his helmet and adjusted his cap before walking in. The bell jingled, and the rich aroma of coffee and home cooking wrapped around him like an old friend. He immediately noticed more changes: new booths along the walls, freshly painted trim, a small reading corner with books and magazines near the entrance. But the biggest change was behind the counter. Lynn stood there, not in her waitress uniform, but in a button-up shirt with a small badge that read manager. She was showing a new employee, a young woman barely out of her teens, how to work the register, her instructions patient and clear. Keanu slipped into his usual corner booth, watching the scene with quiet satisfaction. He hadn't expected this development, but it made perfect sense. Lynn's experience and dedication to the place made her the obvious choice to help run it. A different waitress approached his table. "Coffee, hun?" she asked, pot already in hand. "Yes, thanks," he replied, keeping his voice low. As she poured, Lynn looked up and spotted him. Recognition flashed across her face, followed by a genuine smile. She said something to the trainee and made her way over to his table. "Well, look who it is," she said warmly. "Our mysterious motorcycle man. Haven't seen you in months." "Been traveling," he replied with a small smile. "The place looks great." Lynn beamed with pride. "Thanks. Lot of changes around here. Good ones, though." She gestured to her manager badge. "Tina promoted me back in July. Said she needed someone who cared about this place as much as she did." "Congratulations," Keanu said sincerely. "You deserve it." Lynn laughed lightly. "You know, it's funny. For years, I was just trying to keep my head above water, never thought about moving up. Then all this good stuff started happening, and suddenly I could see possibilities again." She shook her head in wonder. "Life's strange that way, isn't it?" "It can be," he agreed. The front door opened again, and a tall teenage boy walked in. It took Keanu a moment to recognize Bobby, Lynn's son. The back brace was gone, and though he moved with a slight caution, his recovery was evident in his straight posture and easy stride. He carried a backpack over one shoulder and a basketball under his arm. "Mom, coach said I can start practice next week." He called across the diner, too excited to notice the other customers. "Just drills at first, but still." Lynn's face lit up with a mother's pride. "That's wonderful, sweetie." Bobby noticed her talking to someone and approached the table. "Sorry," he said, suddenly remembering his manners. "Didn't mean to interrupt." "No problem," Keanu replied. "Sounds like good news." "The best," Bobby agreed. "Doctors said I might never play again after the surgery, but," he shrugged, the resilience of youth evident in his casual dismissal of what must have been months of painful rehabilitation. Lynn put her arm around her son's shoulders, and Keanu was struck by how much younger she looked now, how the worry lines had softened, how her smile came easily and often. "Bobby's headed to community college next fall," she said proudly. "Full academic scholarship." "Basketball was my ticket before the injury," Bobby explained. "But turns out I'm pretty good at math too. Focusing on that opens some new doors." "Sometimes life's detours take us where we need to go," Keanu observed quietly. The comment seemed to resonate with Lynn. She nodded thoughtfully. "Ain't that the truth? 6 months ago, I thought we were finished. Now look at us." As mother and son continued chatting, telling him about their plans and hopes, Keanu felt a deep satisfaction that went beyond anything he'd experienced on a movie set. Here, without cameras or publicity, was something real. A family that had been given a chance to thrive, not just survive. He stayed longer than he'd planned that day, ordering the meatloaf, still excellent, and listening to Lynn's stories about the diner's colorful regular customers. Not once did she or anyone else recognize him as the famous actor. To them, he was just a kind stranger passing through, and that was exactly how he wanted it. When he finally left, leaving another generous but not suspicious tip, he knew he'd return again someday. Not because the diner needed his help anymore, it was clearly thriving, but because in this simple place, with these genuine people, Keanu Reeves found something increasingly rare in his world: authenticity and the pure joy of an anonymous good deed. Lynn returned to Keanu's table carrying a plate of steaming meatloaf with a side of mashed potatoes and green beans. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, and he noticed a small coffee stain on her faded blue uniform. Despite this, she managed a smile as she set the food in front of him. "Here you go, honorable best meatloaf this side of the interstate," she said, her voice steady but with a slight rasp that suggested she might have been the one crying earlier. "Can I get you anything else?" Keanu studied her face carefully while pretending to arrange his silverware. "Everything looks great, thanks." As she turned to leave, he noticed how she favored her right leg slightly. The slight limp wasn't dramatic enough to impact her work, but it was the kind of injury that probably ached after standing for hours. He'd seen enough stunt injuries to recognize the signs of someone pushing through pain. "Been busy today?" he asked, keeping his tone casual as he cut into the meatloaf. Lynn paused, seemingly surprised by the simple conversation. Most customers just ordered and ate without really seeing the person serving them. "Not too bad," she replied, tucking a loose strand of hair behind her ear. Her hands were red and chapped from hot water and cleaning chemicals. Breakfast rush was hectic. "Got another one coming in about an hour when the factory shift lets out." "You been working here long?" Keanu asked, taking a bite of the meatloaf. It was genuinely delicious, homemade and hearty. "Going on 12 years now," Lynn answered, glancing at the clock above the counter. "Started when my boy was just 5. He's almost done with high school now." A hint of pride crept into her voice, momentarily replacing the weariness. "That's a long time with one place," Keanu remarked, genuinely impressed by her loyalty. "Well, jobs aren't exactly falling from trees around here," she said with a small shrug. "And the hours work with my schedule. Got to be there when my kid gets home, you know. Single mom life." She offered this information matter-of-factly, without self-pity. The bell above the door jingled as a new customer entered. Lynn straightened her apron. "Holler if you need anything else." She walked away, greeting the newcomer with the same professional warmth she'd shown Keanu. As he ate, Keanu watched Lynn move between tables. Despite whatever personal troubles had caused her tears, she was thorough and attentive with each customer. She remembered that the elderly man liked extra crackers with his soup without being asked. She kept the coffee flowing for the truck driver, who barely looked up from his phone to acknowledge her. When she disappeared into the kitchen again, Keanu could hear her speaking quietly with someone. The words weren't clear, but the tone was concern mixed with determination. A moment later, another waitress emerged instead of Lynn. This one was younger, maybe early 20s, with bright red fingernails and a bounce in her step that suggested she hadn't been on her feet for 8 hours already. "Lynn's taking 5, the young waitress explained when she noticed Keanu looking toward the kitchen. "She okay?" he asked before he could stop himself. The waitress, her Namateg red Danny, hesitated. "Yeah, she's fine. Just, well, it's not my business to share, but she's going through some stuff. Nothing she can't handle, though. That woman's tougher than anyone I know." Keanu nodded, respecting the loyalty. "Food's really good," he said, changing the subject. "Yeah, Lynn's meatloaf is famous around here. She won't even give me the recipe." Danny grinned, then moved on to her other tables. 10 minutes later, Lynn emerged from the back, her eyes slightly red but her expression composed. She'd redone her hair and washed her face. If Keanu hadn't heard her crying earlier, he might never have known something was wrong. She approached his table with a coffee pot. "Refill." "Please," he replied, pushing his cup forward. As she poured, he noticed a medical bill peeking out from her apron pocket. The corner that was visible showed an alarming amount of zeros. "Everything okay with the food?" she asked, seemingly unaware of the visible bill. "It's perfect," Keanu said, making a split-second decision. "Actually, I was wondering, who manages this place?" Lynn looked surprised by the question. "That would be Tina. She's in the office right now." "Why? Everything all right?" "Everything's fine," he assured her. "Just curious about the place. Seems special." "It is," Lynn agreed, a genuine smile briefly replacing her professional one. "Saved my life. This job did. Don't know what me and my boy would have done without it all these years." As she walked away to check on her other tables, Keanu made up his mind. Whatever was troubling Lynn, whatever had made her cry in the kitchen, he wanted to help. Not as a celebrity making a grand gesture, but as one human being seeing another's struggle and having the means to make a difference. He just needed to figure out how to do it without revealing who he really was. Keanu was halfway through his meatloaf when the kitchen doors swung open again. Lynn emerged carrying plates for another table, her customer service smile firmly back in place. But something had changed in the kitchen's atmosphere. He could feel it. The cook was banging pots a little louder than necessary, and the young waitress, Dunny, kept glancing toward Lynn with worried eyes. He took his time with the meal, savoring each bite while trying to appear casual. The food really was excellent, homemade in a way that reminded him of comfort and care. Around him, the diner's peaceful afternoon rhythm continued. The elderly couple paid their bill and left a generous tip that Lynn tucked into her apron with a grateful nod. The truck driver dozed off in his booth, his empty coffee cup pushed to the side. As Keanu worked on his mashed potatoes, the kitchen doors swung open again. This time, a middle-aged woman with graying hair pulled into a tight bun stepped out. Her name tag read Tina, the manager Lynn had mentioned. She beckoned Lynn over to the counter, holding what looked like a phone message slip. Though they spoke in hushed tones, the nearly empty diner made it impossible not to overhear snippets of their conversation. "Called again," Tina was saying, her face concerned. "Third time this week." Lynn's shoulders visibly tensed. "I told them I'd have it by the 15th. "I know, honey." Tina placed a hand on Lynn's arm. "If you need more hours." Lynn shook her head. "I'm already working doubles 4 days a week. Any more, and I'd never see Bobby." She bit her lip. "It's the medical bills that are killing me. The insurance only covered half of his last procedure, and now with the rent increase." Their voices dropped lower, and Keanu couldn't make out the rest. He focused on his food, not wanting to be caught eavesdropping. When he glanced up again, Tina had disappeared back into the office, and Lynn was wiping down a nearby table with more force than necessary, her jaw tight. Just then, a loud crash came from the kitchen, followed by raised voices. Lynn's head snapped up, and she rushed through the swinging doors. Keanu set down his fork, listening. "I can't deal with this right now, Pete." Lynn's voice carried through the thin walls, distress evident in every word. "Well, when can you deal with it?" A male voice, presumably Pete the cook, responded. "You've been walking around like a zombie for weeks. The bills are piling up at my place too, you know." "At least you have a place?" Lynn's voice cracked. "I've got 30 days to come up with double the rent or find somewhere new. Where am I supposed to go? You know, there's nothing affordable within 20 miles of Bobby's school." There was a shuffling sound, then a softer tone from Pete. "Hey, I'm sorry. I didn't know it was that bad." "It's fine." Lynn's voice was muffled now, as if she turned away. "It's not your problem." "Maybe my sister's place," Pete started. "No." The firmness in Lynn's voice was striking. "No charity. We'll figure it out. We always do." A moment of silence followed, then the unmistakable sound of someone trying to stifle crying. "The landlord says the new property management company wants to maximize revenue." Lynn's attempt at a sarcastic tone was undermined by the way her voice wavered. 12 years in that apartment, never late on rent, and this is what I get. And with Bobby's medical bills from his surgery, I can't lose this apartment too. The hospital already sent a final notice." The kitchen grew quiet. Keanu could picture them standing there, the tough single mom finally breaking under the pressure, the gruff cook unsure how to comfort her. "Take 5 minutes," Pete finally said, his gruff voice gentler. "Splash some water on your face. I'll watch your tables." "I can't. That guy in the corner still needs his check, and the factory crowd will be here soon." Lynn's professional instincts were kicking back in, despite her distress. 5 minutes, Pete insisted. "The guy can wait. Nobody's gonna die if their coffee refill takes an extra minute." The kitchen door swung open, and Dunny peeked her head in. "Lynn, you okay in there? Table 6 is asking for their check." "Tell them I'll be right there," Lynn replied, her voice steadier now. Keanu quickly returned his attention to his plate, processing what he'd overheard. The picture was becoming clearer. A single mother working herself to exhaustion, facing both an eviction and crushing medical debt from her son's procedure, all while showing up every day with a smile for strangers. As Lynn pushed through the kitchen doors a minute later, her face showed no trace of tears, though her eyes were slightly red. She approached his table with the check, professional mask firmly back in place. "How is everything?" she asked, as if she hadn't just had her world crumbling around her. "Perfect," Keanu replied softly, looking directly at her for the first time since he'd sat down. "Absolutely perfect." Keanu stared at the check in his hand, the amount so small compared to what he typically spent on a single meal in Hollywood. His meatloaf, potatoes, and coffee came to just $14.95. He pulled out his wallet, thumbing past his credit cards to find cash instead. Anonymity was key here. As he counted out bills, his mind raced. He couldn't simply hand Lynn a stack of money. Her pride was obvious from what he'd overheard. People like her didn't want handouts. They wanted dignity and the chance to solve their own problems. He respected that. It was the same spirit his own mother had shown raising him and his sister through tough times. He left $40 on the table, a good tip but not suspiciously large. Then he wrote on the back of the receipt, "Best meatloaf I've ever had. Thank you." It wasn't enough, not by a long shot, but it was a start. Keanu stood up, stretching slightly as he glanced around the diner. The late afternoon sun slanted through the blinds, casting long shadows across the worn floor tiles. The place had real character, from the slightly crooked local sports photos on the wall to the collection of salt and pepper shakers shaped like various animals lined up behind the counter. No wonder it had caught his eye when his business manager mentioned it was for sale. Instead of heading for the door, he walked toward the small hallway marked restrooms. As he passed the manager's office, he saw Tina hunched over paperwork, her reading glasses perched on the end of her nose. He knocked lightly on the open door. She looked up, surprised. "Can I help you?" "I hope so," Keanu said, stepping inside and partially closing the door. He pulled off his sunglasses, keeping his voice low. "I'm Keanu Reeves." Tina's eyes widened comically. Her mouth opened and closed twice before she managed to speak. "Yo." He nodded, putting a finger to his lips. "I'd appreciate if we could keep this between us." Of course, she stammered, standing up so quickly she knocked her pen holder off the desk. "I didn't, we never. Is everything okay with your meal?" The food was excellent, he assured her. "Actually, I wanted to talk to you about one of your employees. Lynn." Tina's expression changed immediately from flustered to protective. "Lynn? She's our best waitress, been here longer than most. Whatever happened, I'm sure there's an explanation." No, Keanu interrupted gently. "She was perfect. I couldn't help overhearing, though. It sounds like she's going through a rough time." Tina sighed, her shoulders slumping as she sat back down. "She'd kill me for talking about this, but yes. Her son Bobby had surgery last month. Spinal fusion after a basketball injury. Insurance fought them every step of the way. And now their apartment building got sold, new management doubling the rent." She shook her head. "She won't take handouts, though. Already turned down our offer to pass a collection jar." Keanu nodded, remembering the stubborn pride in Lynn's voice. "I'd like to help, but in a way she'd accept." He leaned against the doorframe, thinking for a moment. Then it hit him, the perfect solution. "You know, I actually own this diner," he said quietly. Tina's jaw dropped again. "You?" But the management company said. "That's how I prefer to handle these things. Less attention." He smiled slightly. "I have an idea, but I'll need your help to make it work." For the next 15 minutes, they talked in hushed tones. Keanu explained his plan, and Tina's initial shock gave way to understanding, then enthusiasm. By the time the factory workers started arriving for their post-shift meals, they had worked out all the details. "Are you sure about this?" Tina asked as Keanu prepared to leave. "It's very generous." "I'm sure," he replied, putting his sunglasses back on. "Just one thing, Lynn can never know it was me. As far as she's concerned, this is coming from the management company." Tina nodded solemnly. "My lips are sealed. Though I've got to say, the rumors about you being one of the good guys in Hollywood, Seems they didn't go far enough. Keanu shrugged, uncomfortable with the praise. Just trying to be a decent human being. Sometimes a small thing can make a big difference in someone's life. He recalled times in his own life when unexpected kindness had pulled him through dark moments, after his friend River's death, during his sister's illness, following his personal losses. We're all just walking each other home, right? As he headed for the door, he passed Lynn, who was greeting the incoming factory workers by name. Despite everything she was facing, she showed each person genuine warmth. She never even noticed as Keanu slipped out the door, the bell jingling softly behind him. In the parking lot, he paused beside his motorcycle, looking back at the diner one last time. Through the window, he could see Lynn laughing at something a customer had said, her professional mask momentarily replaced by genuine joy. Keanu smiled to himself as he put on his helmet. His visit had started as a simple check-in on his investment. He never expected to leave with an investment of a different kind, one in a struggling family that deserved a break. 3 days later, Lynn fumbled with her keys at her apartment door, exhaustion weighing heavy on her shoulders. The double shift had stretched into extra hours when Danny called in sick. Her feet throbbed in her worn sneakers, and all she wanted was a hot shower and her bed. But first, she needed to check on Bobby. She pushed open the door to their small 2-bedroom apartment. The place wasn't much, outdated cabinets in the kitchen, carpet that had seen better days, and furniture that was mostly secondhand, but it had been home for 12 years. The thought of having to leave in less than a month made her stomach knot up. "Bobby?" she called, dropping her purse on the kitchen counter. "I'm home." Her 17-year-old son appeared in the hallway, moving carefully. The back brace he wore after his surgery made him look stiff and uncomfortable, but the doctors insisted he wear it for at least 6 more weeks. Before his injury, he'd been the star point guard on his high school basketball team. Now he was just hoping to walk normally again. "Hey, Mom," he said, offering a tired smile. "There's some mail for you. Looks important." Lynn's heart sank. More bills, no doubt. The hospital's final notice had arrived yesterday, and she'd been too afraid to open it. What would it be today? A formal eviction letter? The electric company threatening to shut them off? She couldn't take much more. Bobby handed her a thick envelope with the property management company's logo in the corner. Her hands trembled slightly as she tore it open, bracing herself for the worst. Inside was a letter on official letterhead and several pages of documents. She squinted at the first paragraph, her tired brain struggling to make sense of the words. "Dear Ms. Lynn Miller," it began. "We are writing to inform you of changes to your lease agreement following the recent acquisition of your building." Here it comes, she thought, the official eviction notice. She took a deep breath and kept reading. "The new owner has implemented a long-time resident protection program for tenants who have maintained good standing for over 10 years. As you have been a resident in good standing for 12 years, we are pleased to inform you that your rent will be locked at your current rate for the next 5 years, with only minimal increases for inflation." Lynn blinked, sure she had misread. She went back to the beginning and read it again. "What is it, Mom?" Bobby asked, noticing her shock. I don't." She flipped to the next page, which showed a new lease agreement with her current rent amount, not the doubled figure she'd been dreading. "They're not raising our rent. They're keeping it the same for 5 years. "What?" "Let me see." Bobby took the letter, his eyes widening as he scanned it. "Mom, this is amazing. But why would they do this?" Lynn shook her head, baffled. "I have no idea." She continued reading, her hands still shaking. There was more. "Additionally, as part of our new community health initiative, we have established a partnership with Memorial Hospital to assist residents with ongoing medical expenses. Enclosed, you will find information about applying for this program." Lynn flipped to the attached document. It outlined a grant program that would cover up to 80% of remaining medical bills for residents in her building, with special priority for families with children requiring orthopedic care. She sank into a kitchen chair, her legs suddenly unable to support her. It was too perfect, too exactly what they needed, to be real. "Bobby," she whispered, "look at this hospital program. It would cover most of your medical bills." Her son read over her shoulder, his expression changing from confusion to disbelief. "Is this for real? It sounds too good to be true." Lynn turned back to the letter, searching for the catch. There had to be one. Life didn't just hand out miracles like this. The final paragraph read, "These changes reflect our company's commitment to supporting the communities we serve. Your loyalty as a tenant has not gone unnoticed, and we believe in rewarding those who contribute positively to our properties. Please sign and return the enclosed lease agreement at your earliest convenience." It was signed by someone named Thomas Anderson, Executive Director. Lynn looked up at Bobby, tears filling her eyes. For the first time in months, they weren't tears of stress or fear. "I think it's real," she said softly. Bobby sat in the chair across from her, wincing slightly as he adjusted his brace. "But why us? Why now?" Lynn shook her head again. She had no answer. All she knew was that the crushing weight she'd been carrying for months had suddenly lifted. They could stay in their home. Bobby could get the follow-up care he needed. They could breathe again. "Maybe someone's looking out for us," she said, running her finger over the signature at the bottom of the letter. Something about the name Thomas Anderson seemed vaguely familiar, but she couldn't place it. What she couldn't know, was that Thomas Anderson was the name of Keanu Reeves' character in The Matrix, and that the signature on the letter had been penned by the actor himself just 3 days earlier in Tina's office at the Blue Ridge Diner.